see a black man and one man, I think of strength, black empowerment we have within, building community development. Let's continue to build our own. Let's continue to stay strong. Motivation, no matter the hate, no stopping. You just go. Listen up to Quan, John, and Queen P for giving us a voice. Speak up for what's yours and yell and make that noise. We are kings and we are queens. Melanated royalty, just getting started. Loving self, self and knowledge. Stack that wealth. Motivational motors, y'all.
Nigel, I'm a rehabilitation counselor. Okay, so my duty, not even as far as work, my duty in life, I help guide and assist people in repairing themselves socially, emotionally, and sometimes even vocationally. You understand? So with that being said, when I see something I perceive as to be a flaw, my first gut instinct is to let's hit it head on, right? Let's attack it. When that's not everyone's MO. You understand? Some people are comfortable with their flaws. Some people don't even know that they are flaws.
True.
Right? So when you get someone like, and I can tolerate a flaw with someone if I'm not invested. Me, Quan John. If I'm not invested, I can tolerate your flaws. If I'm invested, whether you are my wife, my friend, my child, I can't. I want us, not you, us, to hit it head on. And I think that's where a lot of my conflict comes in relationships. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it's going to depend. You see, everyone's different.
Right.
You know, what approach A is not necessarily going to work with everyone.
Right. That's right.
So basically, you've got to adapt your toolbox to fit the personality that you're dealing with. I mean, I'm a certified relationship coach, so I coach people regarding relationships. Now, at the same time, I understand my limitations. So I have people approach me sometimes, and they're actually in a abusive relationship.
Right.
Now, I had a client about 3-4 months ago, and she wanted me to do couples counseling with her partner and herself.
Right.
And during the conversation, I picked up that she was probably being abused. I didn't say anything because I always do a discovery session. So when someone approached me, I say, no, 30 minutes to discuss them, so I can explore, well, what is it? What are they after? What is it they want to achieve? Because coaching is about setting goals for the future.
Right.
Therapy is about unpacking stuff from the past.
That's right. That's right.
Two different things. And I'm not a qualified therapist.
Right.
Right. I'm a certified relationship coach. So I help people set their relationship goals.
Right.
So anyway, about 6 weeks later, she contacted me again, and she said, "Oh, her partner is now her ex-partner. He had abused her. The police had been called, and the police had to escort him from the premises, basically." But I knew, but my instincts told me that something's not quite right here. And two, I knew he would not agree to couples counseling anyway, because whether you go to couples counseling, coaching, or therapy, both people have to be willing.
Agreed.
Right? So one of the things, because I'm also an advocate for victims and survivors of domestic abuse. So one of the things that we say is basically, if you've got an abusive partner, do not go to therapy. It's probably going to make things worse, and it's probably going to put you at greater risk. Why?
Wow.
Because if you're with an abuser, say you're in a therapy session, and you as the victim of abuse, you say something to the therapist.
Right.
He done X, Y, Z to me last night. The fact that you've now revealed that information, you may well be punished for that further when the therapy is over. When that session's over, you go home, he might start to kick off. Well, why did you say that? Etc. So it can put you at further risk.
Right.
Because if you're in an abusive relationship, there's always going to be a power imbalance, because abusers are all about power and control. Doesn't matter what type of abuse they may be. They can be a narcissist, sociopath, psychopath.
Well,
doesn't matter. Bottom line is, it's about power and control. The difference comes into what strategies they use to try and assert that power and control.
Right.
You know, but there isn't, but to your question, there isn't a one size fits all.
Right.
You know, if you're dealing with, you know, because people are coming from different places, they've got different experiences, they're coming from different cultures. I mean, in my book, I mention about different cultures, right? So, you know, black people tend to be kind of more outgoing and boisterous. You know, white people, Caucasians tend to be a little bit more reserved. But because we can be quite boisterous, that can be perceived as being threatening.
Right.
You know, and it's just culture. It's just different cultures. So there's so many things to unpack when you're dealing with a person, and so many different things you've got to kind of consider. You know, as Paul just said, obviously, you know, your husband's Nigerian. He's coming from a totally different culture and experience than someone who's American. Just I'm coming from a very different experience being British.
Right.
You know? When I was talking with, you mentioned George and Fraser, because I had a conversation with them, you know, and I was explaining.
Great interview. Very good interview.
Yeah, and I said, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, obviously we have racism here, but for me, the racism in America is more kind of in your face racism.
Yes, more blatant.
Here, they're more covert and sneaky about it, but it still happens.
Right.
You know, but so it's just again different, you know, different culture. I mean, if someone said it's quite common in America. What was I watching? Raising Canaan. I was watching that yesterday. Power Book 3. You know, they're using the N word all the time.
Yeah.
That could never happen here.
Wow.
What?
Could never happen here.
Over here is a term of endearment.
I know.
Can be.
I've spent quite a few years studying Black history, so I'm well up on my Black history, and I still keep up to date with what's happening over there. I mean, the big thing for you guys right now is obviously the voter suppression. That's one. Critical race theory. That's two. Because what they're doing the same thing here. So when you look at when I look at the bigger political picture, it doesn't matter if they're right wing in America or if they're right wing in the UK or anywhere else. They all use the same playbook. Right. It's all because they're trying to suppress certain, you know, educational things here about, in universities about you know, the slave trade, etc., etc. Right. So they all try the same games.
Right.
No.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nigel. Let me go back to the domestic abuse portion aspect. When you say this domestic abuse, I'm a firm believer that domestic abuse can come in different shapes, form, and fashions. It can come in physical, verbal, emotional. Am I right? So now, let's say you're in let's say a man, and this is my follow-up question with men and their own trauma and their own abuse. They're being abused in their household. Like me and Portia spoke offline. I'm a firm believer that many, many men are emotionally abused by their wife. And as you said on Georgia Fraser's podcast, we don't have any scars of that. So we can't go to any police officer or any courthouse and say we're being abused. So let's say the wife is holding back, so to speak, their emotions. I'm a firm believer that that's a form of abuse. Especially, I'm gonna hold up now, especially if she has a communicator as her husband. The husband's a communicator, and he's like Portia. He wants to communicate things out. He wants to get things out. He wants to finalize things. And the person on the other side, they're like this. They keep their emotions bottled in. I think that's a form of abuse, in my opinion.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. Right.
Yeah.
First of all, if we're going to talk about men being abused, that is something that is not discussed for a variety of reasons.
That's right. Preach.
There's something called guy talk. So as boys are generally not socially orientated to show their emotions.
No, we're not.
Boys don't cry. Pull up your big boy pants, you know, get on with it.
That's right.
Now these little boys become men. Right. And they don't really know how to communicate their feelings. They can communicate anger usually pretty effectively, but not much else. So then you look at guy code. So guy code is where guys only speak about certain topics. So I'll talk about work, talk about sports, talk about women, anything except dealing with their emotions. The reason they do that is because they fear being judged.
Right.
They fear being judged as not being man enough or not being masculine, etc. So when I started to do that research, I stumbled across the male suicide rate. So if you look at the male suicide rate worldwide, it's 2/3 plus higher for men than it is for women. I am a firm believer that happens is because a lot of guys just suppress their emotions, and it gets to a stage where they can't handle it. I know personally, a friend I grew up with several years ago, he committed suicide. A friend of mine, her son, who was like 25, 26, and he had a job, he had a degree, spoke to his mum every day, took his own life, 25 years old. My friend who committed suicide, he was in his early 50s, and he went to a high-rise car park, just stepped off. And this is the other thing when you start looking at male suicide. When they decide they're checking out. They're going to walk they're going to walk in front of a train. Women tend to more take pills, but you might wake up. Someone might find you, right? If you step off a car park roof, well, that's it. That's all she wrote, basically. Now, in terms of men being abused, that is a societal issue in the sense that women generally are seen as nurturers.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for people to get their head around the fact that, oh, this woman's actually abusive. Now, because obviously men are stronger than women, then a woman who's an abuser, she's more going to go for the psychological route. She's going to go for the mental abuse, emotional abuse.
That's right.
So when you talked about someone shutting down, now shutting down in abuse terms, we call it the silent treatment. So to punish you, they will stop talking to you. That's your punishment. Silent treatment. And the silent treatment actually can have an emotional effect on your brain. Because emotional abuse actually can affect parts of your brain. So that's a lot, to unpack. I mean, I've read more than one story actually, where a guy has gone to a police station to complain about being abused. You get laughed at the station. Go away.
Absolutely.
Put on your big boy pants and go home and sort it out.
Absolutely.
So
and that's sad.
Yeah. And I've read surveys, men being surveyed about expressing themselves, men who've been abused. I mean, I've got a support group for victims and survivors of abuse. I started that group 10 years ago on Facebook. Now I've got 20,000 plus members. But it's predominantly women. So I thought, okay, maybe about 8 months ago, I thought, let me start a group just for men. And that's probably got about 150, 200 members. But I thought, let me just create a space for men only so they can feel more comfortable. And that kind of came from, prior to COVID, I was actually doing workshops. So I was doing abusive relationship workshops and general relationship workshops, but also done a couple of men only workshops. In fact, the first workshop I ever done was actually men only. And within that workshop, some things that I had never considered, came out in that workshop. So yeah, men need to talk more. There's no two ways about that, but they're not necessarily encouraged to do so.
Not at all.
Many of them feel judged for doing so.
Even by their own mate and their spouse. And that's kind of crazy, Portia. I'm gonna get right to you, Portia. It's some men are in relationships with. Now, even with the woman doesn't expect their man to come into the relationship with his own trauma. And if the man is a communicator, that's looked at as a feminine attribute. You understand? And it's kind of crazy. So this is, come on, this is, I know I'm generalizing here, but I would say, most women I've come in contact with, you understand, not even in a relationship, most women I've come in contact with as even a platonic friend, that it's like they don't consider the feasibility of a man coming in contact with, having his own trauma, either from childhood or even from past relationships. And I know you probably would agree, Nigel, let's say, I've had a lot of relationships before I met my wife. So I brought all that luggage to the relationship. I brought all that.
Hold on. Is that wife one or wife two?
Wife two.
Oh, just checking.
Wife two, sorry. Yeah, wife two. So I brought all my misconceptions into this relationship. I brought all my, okay, she does that. So maybe she's doing the same thing that the last one did to this relationship. And I think instinctively we do that until we start understanding, okay, this is a totally different person. You know what I'm saying? But I say all that to say is some women don't understand that we are traumatized too. You know what I'm saying? I have a story in Motivational Motives. It's the first chapter. It's called Cowardly Correspondence. And in the story, the young boy, he hears a gesture from his father that really, really disturbs him. And he keeps this bottled in for years. And then when he becomes a teenager or a younger man, it comes out in a violent manner because he kept it in. And he displaced it towards another individual that actually made that same comment. You understand? So when he heard that comment being made from the other individual, he heard his dad saying that.
He got triggered, basically.
He got triggered. And I think a lot of men become into relationships like that. And one, like you said, we don't talk, so we don't know how to deal with it. And I don't think a lot of our women are even responding or even are empathetic towards the feasibility of us having these traumas. It's a really sad situation, man. You know what I mean?
Well, empathy is good, obviously, but it still goes back to what I said before. In my opinion, though, we're all responsible for unpacking and dealing with our own baggage.
I agree. That's true. We have to unpack our own situation.
You know, because as I said, if you're going into a relationship with baggage, or and trauma on top of that, usually it's not going to end well. Yes. I mean, you can go into a relationship and you can get counseling and therapy during the relationship, but obviously to avoid a lot of mess, better off to when you're single, sort yourself out.
Yeah,
go and do the necessary work, and then go looking for love.
Right.
But if it's just going to be a case of well, I'm just lonely and I want to be with somebody, and you've got all this unhealed trauma.
Right. It's gonna be.
I mean, talking about trauma. I mean, as I said, I grew up in a home where I witnessed domestic abuse as a child, so that had an impact on me. I've been married. I won't even go into how that happened, but anyway, from the marriage, there was a child. My ex-wife told me the child was mine. Wouldn't let me see the child. Took her to court, gained access. So I had him every other weekend. She overplayed her hand. I had the child DNA tested, and it's not like what you guys have with their Maury.
Right.
Just like, get the results in, a couple of hours. Back in those days, when you had a DNA test, you had to wait. You had to wait. Couldn't call anybody. You can't speak to anybody. You got to wait for that envelope to drop. So I had to wait 4 weeks. Results, not my child. So I then had to go through a bereavement process. Not that I understood I was going through a bereavement process. So I went through the bereavement process. I went through trust issues. Went through because I was continued dating, but I would only let a woman get so close to me.
That's right.
Because obviously I had trust issues. After going through that. So but I was never but I was very upfront about it. I would tell if I started to get involved, I would tell them what happened. But I would also say, well, I'm not interested in the relationship. You want to kick it, you want to have fun, go to the cinema. If you want to have sex, that's right. But just understand this. This is not a relationship. Right. I put it straight on the table.
Got you.
Right. So they've got the choice. And mostly that kind of worked out because that went on with me for about 6-7 years. Because what I should have done is what my doctor said, because my doctor took the blood sample for the DNA test. And my doctor said to me, Nigel, you need to have counseling before you get the result. Absolutely. It's not just about the blood test. But me being a man, just want it done. So I didn't have the counseling. So I had to work. So when I got the results, in the aftermath of that, I had to work. I worked it out for myself, but it took time. If I had the counseling, before and maybe probably some more counseling again after, I would have kind of healed that wound a bit quicker. So, but yeah, it took me about a good 8 years before I finally kind of had worked through that particular trauma, because discovering the child wasn't mine. It wasn't just about me.
Right.
Because I've got a brother. My brother has 2 children.
Right.
So when my brother told his children, they're saying, "Oh, no, but that's our cousin." Right.
Oh man.
My mum thought she was a grandmother. So it wasn't just about me.
Right.
It had like out rippling effects, on my side of the family. So yeah. So at the end of the day, you can't ignore. This is the thing, I think, especially for guys. I think a lot of guys try to ignore and suppress their emotions.
That's what we do.
But they've got those emotions got to go somewhere, which then reverts back to the conversation we had about male suicide earlier. Because for me, it's all connected.
Right.
It's all connected. And if you notice with women tend to have good networks.
Yeah.
They go and talk to their girls, and they all go and kick it.
Outlets.
Their girls, and if their man's giving them problems, they go to their girlfriends and say ABC's happening. Guys, not so much.
Right.
Because but not always.
Not always.
I wouldn't say, yeah,
but the women tend to have better networks. As I said, the guys tend to stick to certain particular topics: work, sports, maybe women.
Right.
Anything except emotions, basically.
Right, the basics.
Anything except emotions. If they're feeling bad, or if they're feeling low, if they're having problems in their relationship. Guys are not really, I'm not saying it never happens, I'm just in terms of trends. Guys tend not to. Whereas women will, because women like to talk.
Yeah.
Basically.
Right.
I mean, I know I do. So it's like,